Today we are honored to welcome Craig Meriwether to the show today. I'm very excited to have him on. He's a hypnotherapist, and his expertise really comes into anxiety, right? And a lot of times we have this low-level stress we have throughout the day. We don't know how to handle it, right? And there's so many different therapies that we can get into. Well, this is very effective, and he has an excellent story, and he really has helped many people kind of take control of their minds and as a result take control of their life. So I'm very excited to have him on. How you doing today, man?
Hey, Anthony, I'm doing well. How's yourself?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I'm very excited about this. I'm happy to have you here. So
Yeah.
I'm very curious to hear your story and how you got into everything mindset related, anxiety, and hypnotherapy.
Yeah, and so I'm a hypnotherapist, and I know there's a lot of baggage, a lot of kind of misconceptions, unfortunately, about what hypnosis is and how it works. And certainly, you can get a little bit more into my story, but the reason I became a hypnotherapist is just because of the healing I achieved in my own life, and I was so curious to learn more about consciousness and healing and the subconscious mind that eventually is I wanted to help other people using this same kind of process because I felt it was one of the strongest methods for creating healing, for creating positive transformation, real profound change in your life, and pretty quickly. This isn't talk therapy. It's very different than talk therapy. We are using the power of your own subconscious mind to create the healing. Now, one aspect of mind that is helpful to us, but also can maybe eventually create some blocks and some walls to our growth and to moving forward, is that the main job of the subconscious mind is to keep you safe and protected. Now, one of the ways it's going to do this is by holding on to old hurt and pain that somebody's been through, trauma, maybe even as a little kid, somebody in their 50s, 60s, 70 years old. You may have, experienced great trauma, growing up in an unsafe home, maybe something at school, maybe something with relatives or, strangers. And that trauma they experience, or hurt and pain, or maybe even embarrassment or humiliation at school or something, they have kind of filed away in a filing cabinet within the subconscious mind. And as they go throughout their day, as they bring in the information through the five senses, what they see, hear, taste, touch, and smell, they're filtering it through that filing cabinet. If anything in their day, whether at work or at home or driving around town, if anything looks like or registers as one of those old files, you'll get the warning signals. Now, when somebody pulls a fire alarm in a building, sirens go off, lights go off, warning everybody if there's danger. Well, we also have a warning system. But within our mind and body, it's the feeling states we have in our body. The feeling state of anxiety, the feeling state of anger or overwhelm or worry or fear, anger. These are the warnings. These are sirens going off that there's some sort of danger in our external world somewhere. Now, it may even sort of kind of look like one of those old files, but it's enough to trigger the warning system. And one aspect of being human here on planet Earth is that what you practice, you get better at. And so, of course, that's great if you want to learn the guitar, or the piano, or dance, or martial arts, learning to walk as a kid. But when you're practicing anxiety, you're practicing stress and fear and anger and overwhelm, you just get really good at being angry, at being anxious, literally wiring it into your brain. The ability to react in a kind of a subconscious manner to what your subconscious mind is perceiving as a threat. And the other aspect of being human that's important for this conversation is that the mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. And this is most noticeable when somebody's having a nightmare in the middle of the night. Doesn't matter how realistic the nightmare may be. Maybe, a war veteran having a PTSD dream about combat, being on the front lines, the horror of that situation, even though the war they were in was 30 years ago. Or maybe it's something super ridiculous, super, dumb and stupid, like a cheeseburger chasing you down the street, throwing coconuts at your head. It's ridiculous, never going to happen. But your mind has this shoot first, ask questions later safety protocol. And in that instant, it thinks it's under attack. And it wants to protect you against that attack. So it'll turn on the stress response, even in deep sleep. Brain starts creating adrenaline and cortisol, your heart starts racing to get it to the big muscle of your arms and legs. Your power of the immune system and digestive system turns down so that energy can be transferred to fight or try to find a way to escape. All because a cheeseburger is chasing down the street in a dream. And so you can imagine what's happening in your waking world. And it's that aspect of what you practice, you get better at. And so the subconscious mind, it's there running your immune system, running your digestive system. You get a cut on your finger, it knows there's a problem, it knows what to do about it. It knows if you have a cut on your index finger of your left hand, it doesn't send all the white blood cells to an emergency aid to the pinky finger of your right hand. If somebody's up in Alaska skiing in the backcountry and they break their leg, it knows what bone needs attention. You're going to get an x-ray and get a cast, but it knows that that person's leg is broken, not their arm. If you ever had that experience of, somebody pointing out like, hey, you got a big scrape on your arm. How'd you get that? And you look at your arm, it's like, oh, I don't know how I got that. It's like your subconscious mind knew there was a problem and started fixing it before you were even consciously aware of it. That's the power of the subconscious mind. Of course, it's holding on to habits like tying your shoes and walking down the street and riding a bicycle, zipping up your jacket, all those kind of things we don't have to think about. But the main job of the subconscious mind is to keep you safe and protected. And again, doing so by holding on to old hurt and pain, emotionalizing it to get your attention that there's danger out in front of you somewhere in your external world. So that's the subconscious mind. The conscious mind is that analytical, logical mind, that mind that creates your goals and the plans to achieve those goals and the willpower to go after those goals. But what neuroscience says is that conscious mind only makes up 5% of mind. Subconscious mind makes up 95% of mind. So whenever there's conflict between the logical mind, the emotional mind wins every time. That's why it doesn't have to make any sense. That's why some people may find it frustrating to do talk therapy or do years and years of talk therapy and maybe not seeing any kind of results. They're still hurting and they're still in pain because the issues within the subconscious mind, and it may be an imagined kind of a protection that it's doing based on a real event that maybe happened 50 years ago. And in and of itself, with the knowledge and the wisdom and the understanding of an adult, it's like, well, you're not in danger anymore being a little kid. Yeah, it's not logical, and you can analyze it all you want, but until that hurt and pain is resolved and healed in some way within the subconscious, you're probably not going to see any sort of resolution that releases that alarm system. And so that's the power of hypnotherapy, is by quieting down that conscious level of mind, you can access the subconscious and create real change within you.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So it sounds like the subconscious mind has a lot of like files stored away. Is that right?
Yeah, and this isn't maybe the greatest metaphor in the world, but it's sort of you're programming your subconscious mind all the time. Of course, as little kids, we're learning how to walk. You're programming your subconscious mind and wiring your brain so all these neurons are connecting together so you walk. Watch a little kid, a 12-month-old, 14-month-old kid learning how to walk, and they're falling over and they can't get the balance right. It's like, well, once all those neurons connect together, they have programmed their mind to just, I need a drink of water. So you walk over and get a drink of water. You don't have to think about this stuff. And I like the analogy of the files and the filing cabinet just because there's a certain implication that you're the one that's doing it. And you are. But it's not to say that it was your fault. Let's say if somebody went through a traumatic experience as a child, certainly it's not their fault. It wasn't fair. It shouldn't have happened. And I'm not blaming the victim, but in terms of creating that safety on how to protect yourself, you may be using the instructions set up unconsciously by a child going through a traumatic experience. And you still may be trying to use that protection protocol, those protection instructions as an adult, and probably not going to work very well. But until you change the instructions, why would anything change? It's sort of like computer code. If somebody is, let's say, making an accounting program for their business and they put in there 2 + 2 = 5. Well, the equations aren't going to work out, and it's going to be very frustrating, and it doesn't matter how much you type on your keyboard or slam the keyboard with your fist or rant about it to your friends, how unfair it is that 2 + 2 = 5, your accounting system's not working. And you can take a marker, a Sharpie, and write on your computer screen 2 + 2 = 4. But it's not until you go into that computer programming, look for the issue, find it, 2 + 2 = 5, and then you're like, okay, well, you mend it, you edit it, you clear it out, whatever you need to do, put in there 2 + 2 = 4, press save, and now your equations equal out. And so it's not unlike your subconscious mind. There's programming in there that got set up maybe through trauma or duress, embarrassment, humiliation, somewhere along the line, that programmed certain safety instructions, like maybe if somebody was giving their book report or show and tell, back in elementary school, and didn't go on, and all the kids laughed, and now they put in a safety protocol that it's unsafe to be in front of people. Well, later in life, in their 30s and 40s, as they need to give the big speech at the conference or do the presentation in front of the board of directors or something, that anxiety may be coming up, saying, "Oh yeah, but when you went in front of the class in the 4th grade, it didn't go very well. It was very humiliating and embarrassing, and so we don't want to do that again. So you're definitely not going to get up and do your TED Talk or do the keynote speech or do the presentation for the bank or whatever." And so they may shut that down in terms of even getting to the point of being physically ill, because it's unsafe to do this thing. And even though it may be an imaginary issue in the moment, because you're an adult and you can certainly see that this is way different than show and tell in the 4th grade, the programming is shut it down, or warn the body and the mind that this is a dangerous situation, getting up in front of all these people. And of course, the more you practice something like that, the better you're going to get at it. And until that instruction, till that resolution happens with that kid, and you may not even remember the 4th grade thing. That's the kind of frustrating thing. You could do the talk therapy. I find talk therapy very helpful, very useful, very healing. But if you can't remember consciously that issue happened within the 4th grade with the book report or show and tell or whatever, how are you ever going to resolve it? And you just talk about how, I'm frustrated that I feel so nervous at 40 years old doing a speech. And yeah, logically that you can talk about it and analyze it, but until you use your own healing power to change that programming, resolve that issue, potentially from a long time ago, maybe it was just a few months ago, but maybe it's decades ago that happened, nothing's going to change until you change. Same with computer programming. Until you change the programming, nothing's going to change. You're still going to get the same results back out, 2 + 2 = 5. So until you change that, nothing initially is going to change.
Got it. Yeah, makes sense. So how do these files get stored away exactly? Does it depend on the experience or the severity of it?
But usually, yeah, I'm sure there's some sort of, depending on what color the file is, depends on maybe how intense the protection protocols are going to be. Certainly somebody who's gone through extraordinary abuse as a child may have more intense reactions later in life than, say, somebody who got laughed at during their show and tell, as opposed to the person who didn't get the promotion last month, as opposed to the person who was in the car accident a year ago. These are all different situations and circumstances, and even in terms of like a car accident, different people are going to respond and react differently. Some people are like, "Oh, no, that's too bad, and I'll get my car fixed, and the insurance will take care of it, and just go about their lives and continue on driving and getting on the freeway." Other people may just have an extraordinary fear of driving now, or being in a car, or being on the highway. And so how that relates to maybe something they experienced earlier in life, or just the way their nervous system is wired, it's a pretty extraordinarily complicated thing. That's why I'm not here to analyze or diagnose or prescribe for anybody. I don't know what the problem is. And a good chunk of the time, most people don't consciously know what the problem is either. But what's fascinating about this work is your subconscious mind knows. That's why it's creating this issue. It's very difficult not very resourceful, resilient way of running the body, being in the stress response, creating that anxiety or that anger or that fear. It's not a great way of running, not an efficient way of running the body. But it'll do it because it thinks you're in danger. And so it doesn't do it willy-nilly, it doesn't do it just randomly. People just don't randomly go into anxiety. Because it's such a extraordinarily difficult process for the brain and body to move into. So your subconscious mind knows why you're doing it. Now, maybe an imaginary reason why you're doing it, based on lots of different issues from being a kid or a teenager in your 20s or whatever. And putting those all together, it's created the safety protocol that puts you in that stress response. But it knows why it's doing it. And so that's where the power of this work comes of therapeutic hypnosis. And this work isn't control, it's not mind control, it's not brainwashing. In fact, most of the people I work with are already out of control. Their bodies are running on this, stress response, this fight or flight response, maybe pretty consistently, and they don't know why. They're already out of control. So what this does is actually give you back control of your nervous system, reset your nervous system, calm the body, mind down, resolve and heal old emotional wounds, hurt and pain, reprogram your mind for confidence to give that speech or drive on the highway. And so it's unfortunate that a lot of people's perception of hypnosis and hypnotherapy is what's in the movies and TV shows, which is really unfortunate. It's not control, it's not brainwashing, it's just a relaxed state of mind and body. And nobody can make you do anything you don't want to do. And, a great example of this is I can't make anybody meditate. They could be sitting across from me and I can't take out my pocket watch or move a pin in front of their eyes or something and say, now you're going to meditate and I want you to focus your attention on this next breath and on the next one and on the next one. I can't do that. If somebody doesn't want to meditate, they're not going to meditate. If somebody doesn't want to go into hypnosis, they're not going to go into hypnosis. And everybody can do this work. It's just brainwave state. And we all have that experience probably multiple times a day of the mind drifting off and floating away, and during a boring meeting at work, or maybe remember back in high school, maybe high school math class, and your mind drifts away. Your right nose is going to be on the test. You need to be paying attention, but it's so boring. You start thinking about the weekend or start thinking about that vacation you took, last year. Your mind drifts off to something else. Well, literally, the biology of it is just slowing down how fast your brain is operating. So in the beta brainwave state, in this conscious awareness of the present moment, like when you're having a conversation, you're very interested in what somebody's saying, or you're focused on the task at hand, you're firing about 18, 20 cycles per second. But when your mind drifts off and floats away, like a boring meeting at work, or you're driving home, if anybody's ever had that experience of driving home, and you start thinking about, I got people, family coming over this weekend, or, the big presentation at work's due on Friday. You start thinking about something else, and all of a sudden you're in your driveway or your garage or your parking spot, and you don't remember the last 5 or 6 blocks. We just slowed down how fast your brain is operating. You drifted off. Yeah, your subconscious mind took over driving, like it knows how to walk and zip up your jacket and all that stuff. But your mind drifted off, and you literally slowed down how fast your brain is operating. That little electrical storm of neurons firing together, their little electrical pulses. How fast that happens determines what brainwave state you're in. If you slow it down to the alpha brainwave state, now you're firing about 12 cycles per second. Very daydreamy state of mind. Even with your eyes open, you'd be in this daydreamy state. Watching TV puts you in the alpha brainwave state. A very suggestible state of mind and body, which was actually discovered back in the late 60s and not written about in medical journals, but in the Journal of Advertising and Marketing. And so they've known for 50 years that watching TV puts you in a very suggestible alpha brainwave state. There's going even slower, the theta brainwave state. You're not really asleep and not really awake, and then delta sleep. So literally, the biology of hypnosis is just how fast your brain is operating. And you move in and out of it multiple times a day. So all we're going to do is do it on purpose, and for the purpose of healing and resolving. And that's the whole, stereotype, the trope of the pocket watch and the talking slowly and you're going to sleep. It's like the boring math teacher, like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Anybody seen that movie? The teacher is boring the kids into a hypnotic trance state. And that's where all that comes from. It's like, just focus on the watch swinging back and forth. It kind of bores you and lulls you into the alpha brainwave state, and close your eye. It's just nothing magical about it, nothing mystical about it. There's nothing brainwashing about it or mind control about it. It's just like a boring math teacher, a boring meeting at work, a boring networking event, and just, mind drifts off. That's what we're trying to do. And even like those shows you see in Las Vegas or comedy clubs or wherever, YouTube videos of people doing ridiculous things on stage, dancing like Michael Jackson or singing like Elvis Presley or, quacking like ducks, barking like dogs. Every single person up there volunteered to be up there. They want to be up there. And who's a hypnotist gonna pick? They got to do a great show. People pay big money to be at the show and be entertained. Are they gonna pick the introvert in the back of the room in the shadows, sinking down in their chair, hoping nobody sees them? Or are they going to pick the extrovert who got there early and sat in the front row and is jumping up and down saying, pick me, because they want to be part of the show. They want to be star of the show and have fun and do something silly and ridiculous. And they all have a big smile on their face afterwards. Can't make it. And even a lot of those shows, you watch the videos of it, or maybe you're actually at a show, they'll probably excuse at least one or two people off the stage because they're so nervous about now being on stage or in front of people and the big lights and everything, maybe cameras, that they don't want to be there. And now they're high stress response. Instead of firing around 18, 20 cycles per second in the beta brainwave state, they're now firing about 30 cycles per second in the stress response. They're not going to be able to go down that alpha brainwave state. And so get off the stage, because the hypnotist can't make them sing like Elvis Presley when they're in that state of stress. So this isn't mind control. It's not magic. It's not mysticism. It's just literally doing what you're doing anyway during your day, moving into that alpha brainwave state. You're programming yourself all the time in terms of your beliefs about the world and your role in it and about yourself. That mind chatter, that's coming from somewhere. As from your programming. You're doing it all the time. All we're going to do is pretty much reverse engineer the issue and create new programming for you. We're just going to do it on purpose with the intention of healing. So it's really powerful because you're the one doing it. I don't fix anybody. And in and of itself, hypnotherapy doesn't fix anybody. You fix yourself. Because again, who knows, who better to know what the problem is than you, and who better to know what to do about it than you? Just like fixing the cut on a finger or the scrape on a knee or a broken bone or something, you know what to do about it. And it's just you may be holding on to this hurt and pain because you think the best thing to do is to hold on to it. And maybe as a kid, that was the best thing you could have done. Maybe make yourself small, keep your voice quiet, hide. That may have been the best thing you could have done as a child. But that's not going to work when you're an adult, in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, or older. Hiding isn't going to help you anymore. You have more wisdom and knowledge and understanding. But until that programming gets changed, why is anything going to change? And so that's now you're operating, this adult mind, body, brain with the instructions set up by a child. And so no wonder there's some disconnect and some, hiccups with how you relate to the world. Okay? So change the instructions. I don't mean to make it sound that easy, but sometimes it's that easy.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, what role does it play in anxiety overall?
Well, again, anxiety is more of that warning signal that you're in danger. And you don't want to get rid of anxiety and stress and fear. People who have been in fear and anxiety for a long, long time. I worked with somebody not too long ago. She was in her 70s. And on her intake form, I'm happy to talk with people, like do a consultation and free consultation or email. And let's talk about what you're interested in working on and make sure there's a good match and what we can do to work together to resolve what you're interested in working on. And I'll send an intake form out to people so I can get more clarity, more information, help plan out the session. And some people write 8 very detailed paragraphs. This one woman, she wrote one word, anxiety. That's what she wanted to work on. And that's what we work on. You know, she knows what that means. She knows what that target means. And within her subconscious mind and maybe even conscious mind, she just didn't want to reveal too much. Maybe didn't feel safe in that way. But we had talked about how it can help with fear and anxiety and stress. So I want to work on my anxiety. All right, that's what we work on. And when we got to a session, a Zoom session, because I do most of my sessions over Zoom because people feel relaxed and comfortable in their home. So nowadays, just like doctor's appointments and talk therapy and relationship counseling, and most of my sessions, probably 85-90% of my sessions are over Zoom, which is nice because I get to work with people around the country and around the world. We're doing a session over Zoom, and our intake form says one word, anxiety. And so wanting a little more clarity about it, like, well, how long have you been dealing with this anxiety? And the 70-year-old woman says, since I was 19. All right, so for 50 years, her body has been in this stress response, has this alarm system going off. And so we created some healing around that, some deep healing in that first session. We start right away. There's no get to know you. Well, the consultation call, the intake form, that's the get to know you period. That first session, we start the healing work. And we did some deep releasing and letting go. We did a second session about a week later. And she revealed that she had been abused as a 8-year-old. We worked on the deep resolution and healing around that. Never saw her again. She did all the healing work she needed to do in 2 sessions. And, so I reach out to people and still, send out newsletters, and I specifically reach out to certain people and just like, hey, how are you doing? Just want to check up, make sure you're doing great. She's doing amazing because she knew what she needed to work on, and she did the healing work. So generally I see people 3 or 4 times. That's it. That's the average. Some people 1 time, some people 2 times, some people 7 times or 8 times. Just kind of depends on what they want to work on. But this doesn't take a long time. This isn't talk therapy where we're going to do 80, 90 sessions over 2 years. But in terms of, the anxiety, like in and of itself, you don't want to get rid of fear and anxiety. Those warning signals are important. It keeps you from walking down the dark alley at midnight. Even though it's a shortcut home, you don't go down a dark alley by yourself. You stick to the lighted streets where all the people are. It keeps you from peering over the edge of the Grand Canyon too far. It keeps you from petting the bear, the nice fuzzy bear, as you're wandering around Alaska, or the rattlesnake out in the desert. That's what that fear and anxiety is there for. So, but it doesn't need to be a 50-story building. It needs to be like a 5-story building. And so that's, part of the work is retraining your nervous system to react more appropriately or respond more appropriately to the dangers of life. There are dangers in life, certainly. And you want your nervous system to respond appropriately when feeling unsafe, when it's that constant churning of anxiety and stress and fear and anger because maybe what's happened in the past, maybe recently, maybe a long time ago, and you've just been practicing, wiring that into your system. Saying, well, it's time to create some change around that. And so your nervous system works in a more resilient and more resourceful way rather than just reacting to fear for everything.
Got it. Makes sense. Let's talk about past lives. How does that play a role in your work?
Oh my God. Okay. Well, there's a 10-hour conversation. Past life is very interesting, and this is, of course, the more spiritual side of this work. Hypnotherapy is kind of an umbrella term for a lot of different techniques and tools. And when you move into the more kind of deeper end of the swimming pool, if you will, you can use this work as a way of connecting to that other side. Like some people use ayahuasca or peyote or some of those plant medicines to do this kind of work. You can also use some of these techniques of therapeutic hypnosis for those altered states. And I base my work on Michael Newton, his 2 famous books he wrote, Journey of Souls and Destiny of Souls. And he passed away in 2011, but he was a psychotherapist who in, I think, 1969, he was working with somebody wanting to create some resolution and resolve some hurt and pain. And during one session, he decided to use some hypnotherapy to regress that person back to cause, as they say, fancy technical term, but regressing somebody back to childhood, basically, to resolve an issue that maybe they're consciously unaware of. So they're doing this regression work in hypnotherapy. Well, the guy didn't stop at childhood. His memories kept going past childhood, past being a baby, and went into soul state, or just being a spirit, kind of what Michael Newton eventually called life between lives, where he's just this soul before coming to earth. And he did his deep healing work there. And Michael Newton was stunned at the amount of healing work he did, wanting to see if other people could achieve this kind of healing, if he could, since it was accidental, could he do it on purpose, get somebody back into the state. And so he spent a lot of the 70s just working with people and getting them into this state and creating healing work. And he worked with so many people, he started realizing that they were having similar experiences to each other. And this is 1970s. There's no internet, there's no cell phones, there's no texting, there's no WhatsApp. They didn't know each other. And they're coming from different walks of life, different parts of the country, maybe different parts of the world, different age groups. And they were having similar experiences. And so he started working with that aspect of it. He did about 20 years worth of research, all the 70s, all the 80s. He released his first book, Journey of Souls, in 1992, about people's experiences of the soul state, of the soul world. And he did another decade's worth of research in the 90s, and in 2002 or so, he released Destiny of Souls, which is twice as big as Journey of Souls. And then he developed the Michael Newton Institute, and they've continued to do research. I think they released a book just a couple years ago. And I was always fascinated. Well, one, spirituality was just a big part of my life, or craving spirituality. I guess I grew up in the Episcopal Church. I went to a Baptist school, so those are two very divergent kind of forms of Christianity. But I was always fascinated by spirituality as I learned more about other cultures. In the 1990s, when I moved to Santa Cruz, California, and there's philosophies and there are theories of life in the universe and everything, and their spirituality, I just understood more about reincarnation and past lives as a part of that. And with the work of Michael Newton, a lot of people in those experiences he worked with tens of thousands of people over 30 years, let alone you're still doing the work. So, whatever it's been, 60 years or, 55 years, that we seem to be coming back to this earth as like a classroom, growing and learning and developing as souls. Sort of like if you're to learn mathematics, and in the first grade, you're going to learn 2 + 2 = 4. And then the second grade, you're going to learn subtraction. The third grade, you're going to learn your times table. The fourth grade, you're going to learn division. And then in high school, you're learning algebra and calculus and trigonometry. And then you're getting your master's degree and writing those crazy equations on the chalkboard. Well, he didn't just start with the crazy equations. He had to start with 2 + 2 = 4. Well, if you can look at every grade that we go through school as a life on earth, you can see it may take multiple lifetimes to really learn just one subject, let alone something like love or compassion or empathy. One aspect of this work of learning and growing as souls and coming to this computer simulation, this multiverse, whatever this is, this holographic universe known as planet Earth and the Milky Way and all that. Coming back to this classroom, if you will, let's take a broad example of learning about wealth and abundance. Of course, learning about wealth and abundance, yes, you probably want that experience of being the billionaire with the golden palace and the yachts and all and the rocket ships that you get to take yourself up in and all that stuff, being a very rich person. But would it not also help inform about wealth and abundance if you lived in destitution on the streets of Calcutta? Would it not also help you to understand what it'd be like to live paycheck to paycheck in maybe a poor part of the country? There are different aspects of wealth and abundance that would be important to learn. And so might it take multiple lifetimes to really gain insight to that? And so I wrote my own book just recently more about the science and spirituality of past life regression, called Past Lives Guidebook. And it talks a lot about consciousness being non-local, a lot of that research coming from the U.S. government and remote viewing experiments they did in the 70s and 80s, and I'm guessing probably still continue to do. If it worked, why would they ever shut it down? But also, things around computer simulation theory and holographic universe and, the multiverse, how this all connects together on top of history of past life regression and reincarnation throughout different cultures, throughout time, starting with Neanderthal burial sites 50,000 years ago. And is there any indication they had any thoughts about life after death? And so I enjoy books about people's stories of past life regression, but my book, Past Lives Guidebook, is more about that science. And if consciousness is non-local, and the government showed during the 70s with their remote viewing research that not only can you move consciousness across location, but you move it forward and backwards in time. And so what's the extent of that for us between the work, 60 years of the Michael Newton Institute, basically 55 years on top of government research, on top of more understanding about this reality we're living in? How does it all fit together? And does past lives, have anything to do with our growth and learning as people, as souls? And in and of itself, when you're doing a past life regression, it's not that you're time traveling. It's just accessing a memory. Just like if I was to ask somebody, just close your eyes, I want you to tell me about high school. Did you go to a big school, a small school, your graduating class, how big was it? Did you go to high school prom? What did you wear? What was the music? What was the theme? Did you have a limo? Where did you go out to eat? Who were you dating in high school? Did you do sports? Did you do, theater? Did you do music? Did you smoke cigarettes with the cool kids out behind the gym? What was your experience of high school? It's not like you go time travel and go back to high school. It's not Back to the Future. You're just having a memory. Or what's your earliest memory? Or tell me about that lunch you had at that new restaurant a month ago. You're having a memory of an experience. Well, same with past life regression. You're just accessing a memory. And again, there's a whole 10-hour conversation about where memory is stored and how it's accessed. And this brain seems to be more of an antenna rather than a storage house of memory. And that's a whole, again, gets into a whole mind-twisty can of worms that gets opened up. But past life regression is a very fascinating and interesting tool to use to, again, help resolve, because just as a 70-year-old can be holding on to hurt and pain from something that happened as a child, just imagine extending that a little bit further. What if you're holding on to hurt and pain you experienced maybe in a past life? Can that be resolved? And can that then resolve any patterns around this, the issues you may be experiencing in this life?
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. It's a hard topic to kind of form your head around in just 5 or 6 minutes, especially if you're new to it. But it's extraordinarily fascinating. One of the more popular people in this field of past life regression, Dr. Brian Weiss, actually just crossed something off my bucket list and was able to do a workshop with him just last summer. Man's 82 years old. But he kind of is the pioneer or the flashpoint of the modern era past life regression movement, if that's what this is, with his book, Many Lives, Many Masters, which came out in 1988. And what I find fascinating about Dr. Brian Weiss, he's not a new agey guy. He's not even really a spiritual guy. He's a left-brain analytical academic. That's his words. That's how he describes himself. He has a chemistry degree from Columbia University. He has a medical degree from Yale. He went into psychiatry. And a lot of his research work was with Alzheimer's and dementia back in the late 70s, early 80s. He's one of the pioneers that was kind of focused on that and writing papers and chapters and academic books about that kind of stuff. And he was head of psychiatry at Mount Sinai Hospital in Miami. And he was working with a woman, Kathleen, I think he calls her in his book, if I remember correctly. And he was working with her for like a year. Medical degree, psychiatry. He just couldn't figure out a way to help her resolve her fear and her anxiety for a year. And he comes to a conclusion, well, maybe we should do some regression work, maybe back to childhood, to source. And so he does hypnotherapy to help her regress back to childhood, to help resolve the stuff that she's dealing with. And she goes back to a past life. She goes past childhood. She goes past being a newborn. She goes back to a past life, I believe, in Egypt. Well, one aspect of subconscious mind, it likes to speak to us in symbolism and metaphor and storytelling. Freud said that, Carl Jung said that, Milton Erickson said that, Lauren Pitts-Pearls said that. Well, Brian Weiss, being an extraordinarily intelligent person with a medical degree from Yale, he thinks, well, this is a symbolic, metaphoric healing the subconscious mind is creating to finally release and let go of the hurt and pain. This story she's creating about Egypt and a past life is to help heal and create, because she created deep healing in that session. So they do a few more past life regressions back to this time of Egypt because he wants her to heal and resolve these issues. And he finally comes to the conclusion she's doing so much deep emotional healing that she couldn't do before, that it has to be real. He finally comes to the conclusion that the kind of deep emotional healing she's doing could only be done by her resolving a real experience. She was also getting, this is 1980, mind you, she was also getting deep, extraordinarily detailed information about Egypt of that time period. This is PhD level information. There's no internet. Our internet back then was the Encyclopedia Britannica. And the section on Egypt did not have all this kind of more detailed information. It's the kind of detailed information that only Egyptologists and archaeologists would know. And with his connections to Yale, he was able to talk with some people, and they confirmed what she was revealing and what she was saying. She also started getting detailed information about Brian Weiss's own private life. Things like he had a child die really young, like 1 year old. There's no obituary, there's no information. Again, this is 1980, there's no information about this on any sort of internet kind of thing. It's very private information, only a handful of family members and of course a few doctors knew about. And it even happened in Miami area. So it's not that she had any way of accessing this information. And finally, Brian Weiss, as the academic, analytical, left brain doctor, finally had to come to the conclusion that this was real. What she was experiencing was past lives, and he had to change his beliefs and his worldview around that. Because it's that Sherlock Holmes saying, the Sherlock Holmes quote, when you eliminate the impossible, whatever's left over, however improbable, is the answer. And it's, again, that, and it's also another great quote by William James, one of the pioneers of the modern day psychotherapy movement. And William James said once that to prove that all crows are not black, you only need one white crow. And when you start adding all this stuff together, not only the work of Michael Newton, not only the work of Brian Weiss, amongst all the other academics that are researching ESP and psychic ability and the government research into remote viewing, again, as conspiratorial as that sounds, as conspiracy theory as it sounds, like Bigfoot and all that stuff, that's real. That really happened. That got released due to the Freedom of Information Act back in the early 1990s. That you can find these documents on the CIA.gov website. And so, as fantastical as it all sounds, and it does sound fantastical, I admit that. After a while, you just have to go, like, how many white crows do you need? And again, it may be mind twisty and hard to wrap around concerning kind of the world views we grew up with children, but after a while, even when the people, of course, way smarter than me, doing those crazy equations on the chalkboard with their master's degree, they're talking about computer simulation, they're talking about the multiverse, they're talking about the holographic universe. They're talking about the brain being antenna, not holding on to information, but sort of like a signal, like your car radio, and you turn it into a certain frequency, and you pull in information. It's sort of like, oh, here's a whole different conversation. I know we got to get going here pretty soon, but the sudden savant syndrome, and this is a real experience people have when they've had a traumatic brain injury, where they wake up with a skill that they didn't have before. There's a kid who got hit in the head with a baseball, and when he woke up, he could speak Spanish fluently. There's a guy who dove into a shallow pool and bonked his head, and when he woke up, could play piano like a virtuoso, and knew music, skill he didn't have before. He didn't care about music. And this is very, 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 very rare. So don't go like driving your car into a wall because you want to learn Spanish or something. This is extraordinarily rare, but it has happened and has been documented. And so that has to change our understanding of the brain and how we even gain information. And maybe it's not that we're learning information. So sort of like there's this idea, of course, of muscle memory. Somebody's doing martial arts or playing music or something like that. Let's say dance or martial arts. You do it over and over and over again because you're building the neural pathways in the brain and muscle memory. Well, of course, we know muscles don't have memory, but it's the idea of you do it over and over again, it becomes an automatic habit. Well, that doesn't explain sudden savant syndrome at all. It's almost like you're driving down the road and you hit a pothole, and the radio station just turns to another station. You're just bringing in different information now, and it's almost as if those neural pathways that get created by practicing something over and over again, getting stronger and faster, maybe that's not what's holding the skill, but it's just creating a stronger antenna to pull in even more information about that particular subject, which would explain how getting bonked in the head in a certain way at a certain time, in a certain place, would allow you to all of a sudden access that information, And so again, it's that thing. It's like, well, how many white crows do you need? Let alone the work of Ian Stevenson, an academic, I forget where, North Carolina somewhere, but a lot of work he did in the 60s and 70s of going to research and verify reincarnation stories from around the world. Lots of books of him and doing the forensic investigation around that. And so after all, even all the books he wrote, even if he just has one case that he could prove, let alone the 100 or so that he did over 20 or 30 years, even if it was just one, well, there's your white crow. That proves that all crows are not black, let alone the Brian Weiss, just the one person that he first wrote about in Many Lives, Many Masters, let alone the people Michael Newton worked with, let alone remote viewing research. After a while, it's like, how many white crows do you need? And that's what I try to do with the Past Lives Guidebook, is like line it all up. So by the end of the book, you're like, you eliminate the impossible. Whatever's left over, however improbable, has to be the answer. And so again, this is like the very beginning stages. This is 15 minutes of a 10-hour conversation that still won't provide probably all the answers. In fact, the more you kind of dive into this, you seem to just gain more questions. As you gain answers, you seem to just have more questions. But it's definitely fascinating.
Yeah, fascinating. All right, Craig, this has been awesome. I appreciate you so much for coming on the
It was
show
fun
today.
talking to you. I'm glad you brought up the past life stuff, because it's a fascinating conversation, and there's so much information out there to deep dive into, but certainly is a nice way to kind of dip your toe into the pool and learn more about it.
So I appreciate you sharing your story with us. And what hypnotherapy is, right? How we can kind of utilize it to navigate anxiety in a skillful way and kind of take control of our minds and really become the greatest version of ourselves. That's really what it's all about, being an owner of our own minds, having agency, right? And this is a very valuable tool. So again, I thank you. And if people want to connect with you and all your work, where can we find you?
Two best ways. My more standard clinical hypnotherapy website is Arizona Integrative Hypnotherapy. I know that's a mouthful. I live in Flagstaff, Arizona, though I do most of my work over Zoom, so I work with people around the country, around the world. So if you just went to Google and typed in Flagstaff Hypnosis as a search term, you'll see Arizona Integrative Hypnotherapy. In terms of the more spiritual side of this work, I have Sacred Mystery Hypnotherapy. So both those places you can find a way to email me, and happy to get on the phone and chat with anybody about any sort of side of this work of healing.
All right. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah.